Okay, here's our data. Let's call this our X column. Let's call this our Y column. Let's call this our XY column. And let's call this our X squared column. So we already have X, we already have Y. To get XY, we're going to need equals this number times this number. The 6.29 is the product of these two numbers, and let's just drag this on down. It'll do it for everything here. And now for X squared, what is going on here? This should say X squared. Maybe it didn't like that. Anyway, what we need now is this number squared, etc. So we're going to say equals this number squared. And that 2.89 should be 1.7 squared. So let's drag this on down. Now let's get the sums. This will be sum of the x's. We'll just put the sums underneath each thing. So for the x's, it's just going to be SU, whoops, didn't do my equals, equals SU, double click on sum, and then we need to highlight our x's here, and here they are. And I think we can just drag that across. That'll just add up all our sums, won't it? Let's check it. This one here says, yep, that adds up all our sums. Okay, now let's start putting these in our formula. This is for the B0. I don't know how to do subscripts in Excel. Maybe you do. Why don't I call it B sub 0. Now let's use our formula for that. B sub 0. We have to start with equals. Now that whole numerator was sum of the y times the sum of the x squared minus the sum of the x times the sum of the xy. You need to refer back to that. So all of that needs to be in a parenthesis. The whole numerator. So sum of the y, here's your y sum, multiplied by the sum of the x squareds, here's your x squared sum, then minus sum of the x's, here's your x sum, multiplied by sum of the xy, and here's your xy sum. Close your parenthesis, and that's your whole numerator. Now that's divided by, if you look at your notes from before, n times the sum of the x squared minus the quantity sum of the x's squared. So let's open a parenthesis for the denominator. Our n is 14, so 14 multiplied by sum of the x squared. Here's our x squared right here. Minus, now the sum of the x's is 40.9, and we want that quantity squared. So close your parenthesis and enter it. And we get 9.6447. We can just round that off to 9.6 later on. Now let's do the P sub 1, B sub 1. Maybe we should put a space in there. B sub 0. And let's call this B sub 1. Now let's look at our formula for that. Start with equals. It says n times the sum of the xy minus the sum of the x's multiplied by the sum of the y. And all that's your numerator, so we need a parenthesis for that. N is 14 multiplied by the sum of the xy, that would be this, minus sum of the x's, that would be this, 40.9, multiplied by sum of the y's, that would be this, and this, now close your parentheses because that's the whole numerator. And, well, if we were doing this by hand, we would have seen what the denominator came out to be, and we wouldn't have to do it again, but we're doing it in Excel, so I guess we are going to have to do it again. So the denominator got to do again because I didn't write down, or we didn't figure out what it actually was. So make a parenthesis. Again, we got to do this. So n is 14 multiplied by the sum of the x squared. So here's the x squared right here. And then it's minus the sum of the x's, which is this, squared. And close your parentheses. 1.67 roughly. Now you have to write your whole equation. Your whole equation would say y equals b sub 0, which we're going to round off to 0.96, plus, now let's put a space in there, plus, now b sub 1, let's call that 1.67, 1.67x, and that's your regression equation. That's the equation of your regression line. So y equals 0.96 plus 1.67x.